hands above your head! Got the wrong guy. Got the wrong guy. Got the wrong guy.
How do you describe yourself? What were you?
Working for the KGB.
Spy.
Mm-hmm. Sure, that's, yeah.
I always affectionately called him the absent-minded professor.
No one who knew him would have thought Aldrich Ames capable of selling some of his country's most valuable secrets to the Soviets. But he did, and got away with it for nearly a decade.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Ames joined the CIA amidst the turmoil and idealism of the 1960s.
This little light of mine.
The war in Vietnam was unraveling.
I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party.
And the Cold War shadow games between the KGB and the agency were becoming ever more intricate.
We're all young officers together. We were all thrilled about what we were doing, excited.
Sandy Grimes, recruited straight out of college, joined the same year Ames did.
I received a phone call, please report to the headquarters building. There's my branch chief. And he said, welcome to the Soviet Bloc Division. This is the GRU branch. I didn't have a clue what the GRU stood for.
Ames and Sandy worked together in Soviet counterintelligence, recruiting and managing Russian double agents. The agency called them the Assets.
Nightly cable traffic. Okay, 2 routine, 1 night action, 3 immediate.
The most exciting place to work in CIA in those days was working against the Soviet target. That was the big leagues.
Ames and Sandy drove in to work together every morning, making the surreal journey from cozy suburbia into a world where everything was secret.
Hey, want to grab an early smoke?
No, I quit for good.
The Rick Ames I knew back in the 70s, the guy I carpooled with, he was a great guy. Rick was driving, he'd pick us up at one house, and then we go to another house. Even though he was funny, you enjoyed his company, there was always a little edge that he thought he was smarter than anyone else.
But Ames was no James Bond. He'd flunked out of college and then tried and failed at acting. He was an unlikely agent. Then again, so was Sandy. Grimes was part of a new generation of women in the CIA who sought to combine spying with marriage and family.
When I first arrived in 67, most of the women were secretaries, and they were, I think, all single. We changed along with society. There were more women who were professionals, young professionals, who had just gotten married, they were having kids, and decided to continue working.
Mom, where have you been? I need to talk to you about Saturday night.
Not now!
Talk?
You know I can't.
Her husband Gary and her daughters knew she worked for the CIA, but no more.
Hey, I haven't left yet.
I knew stuff was going on, but I had no idea what specifically she was doing. I didn't know that she was involved in any counterintelligence activities. I didn't know that she was managing, if you will, spies or spies' activities. I just didn't know those things, and I knew that I wasn't supposed to know those things.
Nobody leaves this house without a nutritious breakfast.
She didn't do hot meals for the kids. They never expected it, never wanted it. I don't think they suffered as a result of it. I'm not sure she knows how to make a pancake, much less ever did.
While Sandy worked her way up at agency headquarters, Ames was stationed in Mexico. When he came back, his colleagues say he had changed.
Long time since we carpooled, huh?
Oh, yeah, God. A long time.
His first marriage was ending. He'd met a young woman and he was in love.
Do you read a lot?
A lot.
So do I.
That person, what I fell in love with back then, was a person who inspired a lot of confidence, a sense of security, of stability.
Dave, you shepherded me a long way towards my marriage. And Rizal, all the best to you, and I know you're going to be happy.
A Colombian attaché from a prominent family named Rosario Casas Dupuy.
And he said he loved me very, very much.
But there were problems. With bad reviews and reports of excessive drinking, his career was stalling.
Hey, honey.
Hey! I got you some presents.
His divorce from his first wife was expensive, and his new wife had expensive taste.
Am I spending too much money?
No.
He had one thing that he could sell: information. Ames knew the names of every Russian agent that was working for the CIA. And on April 16th, 1985, he switched sides. He walked into the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., and asked to meet the KGB station chief.
My name is Aldrich Ames. I work for the CIA. I think he'll want to meet with me.
What you did for money? Stop me if I say anything that's wrong. Perhaps because you felt underappreciated by the agency?
Not particularly, no.
What pushed him over was his wife. It was Rosario. The money didn't mean anything to him. It meant something to him only because he wanted to keep her happy.
Let's talk about your information.
The KGB would proceed with caution with a volunteer like Ames.
We have to, really thoroughly investigate the background of the guy and find out if he's a genuine one.
Oleg Kalugin was the KGB's chief of foreign counterintelligence. His specialty? Flipping foreign agents.
First of all, he may be a double agent. He's working under the guidance of the counterintelligence service. Second, he may be a jerk. And he stole somewhere or found documents that he would deliver it, get the money, and that's it.
But if you want more money from us, you have to give us real information.
And the KGB also came to believe Ames was the perfect double agent, someone who craved not just money, but respect.
Some were simply so hurt or humiliated in their own country. That would be an act of revenge, of sorts. And this is very important when you're dealing with intelligence officers. You have to be very careful not to, make them feel sort of disrespected, humiliated, because once they feel that way, politics, money doesn't matter. They would want to restore their human dignity, and for human dignity, they will do anything. Their own dignity. Betray their own country, it doesn't matter.
They were right. Within weeks of that first meeting, he walked out of the CIA with files that they later called the Big Dump, the names of every double agent inside the Soviet government.
This is everyone. All our assets.
When the Russians checked and Ames's information proved to be correct, he was viewed as one of the most valuable sources inside the U.S. intelligence community.
One of the most valuable names Ames turned over was Dmitry Polyakov, a revered Soviet general. Polyakov was posted to New York in the 1960s and made contact with the FBI. His first encounters with them captured by an agent on a tape.
I just want to give you some useful. To give you useful information. If I'm not the right one, Dmitry, you are very clever. Série, for the moment. CIA, yes.
Отец в Москве последнее время поговаривает о том, кому можно доверять, а кому нет.
Ты можешь быть уверенным. Я люблю свою страну. А те, кто ею правит, могут идти к черту.
Polyakov was one of a generation of World War II heroes who had become appalled at the Soviet government's crimes against its own people.
It's really the end of the Soviet Union. You cannot build a paradise on earth on the corpses of millions of people. It killed so many enthusiasts of the Soviet regime that they would think twice before they will work for the intelligence of their own country. They would rather work for other.
Polyakov's code name was Top Hat. His handler was Sandy Grimes. She monitored Polyakov's every move as reams of information about his life and his family streamed into the agency.
His contact with the U.S. government went on for just about 20 years. And more than half of my 26 years working at the agency, my career was intertwined with this case, starting from the second month after I joined a 21-year-old who knew nothing. These were human beings, and you took it upon yourself to keep them alive. You're the mom and dad.
General Polyakov's access to secrets inside the Soviet Union was unparalleled. His value to the U.S., transformative.
We had everything. He was our crown jewel.
I've studied this man for months now. I know him. I understand how he thinks. Look at the general on the far right. Look at his wrist. Top Hat is using our gifts to climb up the GRU ladder so he can be a better spy for us.
Unlike Ames and many other double agents, the general didn't want money. He only wanted luxury goods, and that just for bribes. For himself, he wanted fishing gear. In return, the keys to the Soviet strategy against America, military plans, missile blueprints, documents of all kinds, even strategic assessments from the inner circle at the Kremlin.
What they thought about the Chinese, what they thought about the Indians, what they thought about the U.S., the French, the Germans. Unvarnished.
At the time, the general's family had no idea that he was a double agent, but his granddaughter has spent a lifetime deciphering why he did it.
I think he realized that if the Cold War happens, no one will be alive. Both sides pretty much will be destroyed. And I believe that he pretty much just did everything he could to save his family, his kids, and other people around the world pretty much.
He believed that the United States and its leaders were weak, that we didn't understand how dangerous the Soviets were, and they'd use any means possible to destroy us. And we just didn't, our values weren't that. And he really thought that the hammer and sickle was going to win the world, but that he might be able to play a small part in it and helping us.
Ames was paid handsomely for turning the general and some other double agents over to the KGB.
You gave up your country, too.
No. No significant damage to our national security interests occurred.
But the human toll was devastating. The Soviets reacted with brutal simplicity. One by one, they rolled up the CIA's prize assets, and they themselves filmed what happened next. This is Adolf Tolkachev, who provided the U.S. with Russian fighter jet designs before they were built. Spies inside the Soviet military, inside the Kremlin, and at embassies around the world. More than 20 of them, all tried and most executed with a bullet to the back of the head.
Дедушка! Дедушка!
Да, любовь моя.
Я тоже хочу попробовать половить рыбу. Покажешь мне?
Да. Но надо ловить именно так. Иначе ты ничего не поймаешь.
By this time, Polyakov was retired to a country dacha outside Moscow, helping raise his granddaughter there.
In the summer, we would go to dacha. He would build furniture for my dolls. During the celebration of May 9th, which is a victory day, it was a huge parade in Moscow every year, so he would always dress up and take me to the parade. And We would go to Red Square and he would tell me all about, the missiles and things, tanks that were passing by during the parade. So it was quite fun.
But one day the general told his granddaughter he had to leave.
Дедушка, тебе помочь?
He told, he has a function to go to Moscow. I was quite surprised, but he all dressed up.
Ты похож на короля.
He went, and after that, I've never seen him again. And
Дедушка.
Spies inside the Soviet Union knew the risks. Some carried poison to avoid interrogation and torture. The men are going through the general's pockets looking for a pill that might allow him to choose at least the manner of his death.
Военная коллегия Верховного суда СССР считает необходимым применить в отношении его исключительную меру наказания смертную казнь, а также статью 36 УК РСФСР.
Facing death, Polyakov was unapologetic. He defended his decision to turn on a regime in which he no longer believed. Later, a tape would emerge of the trial that was held and filmed in secrecy, but at the time, Polyakov was so formidable an asset that though they had lost track of him, Sandy's team convinced themselves that he was okay.
We just said, no, he will survive. He is different. And he wasn't different. It's still hard to talk about. And of course, in many respects, it's more difficult because to Rick Ames, this is just the business.
The men that I betrayed had made similar choices and taken similar chances.
Ames would receive more than $2 million from the KGB over the following years, possibly the most ever paid out by the Soviets to a foreign spy.
Nuclear arms talks between the United States and the Soviet Union have been dead.
A senior Reagan administration official said today there has definitely been a meltdown at the nuclear reactor in Chernobyl.
They met for the last time in this summit at the International Press Center.
Martinov is missing. He accompanied Yurchenko back to Moscow. Now he's gone.
At first, the CIA did not fully understand what was happening. They only knew that they were losing touch with their assets.
Soviet expert in technology is missing and may have been executed, according to some reports.
They turned to a veteran CIA counterintelligence officer to figure out why, one by one, key double agents had suddenly gone silent.
Jean Vertevay here to see O'Neill. Hello, Aldrich.
You're back.
Yes, I'm back.
What are you doing here?
I'm here to bag an elephant.
I was given a very definite task, and that was to try to discover why our operations had gone wrong in 1985, our operations against the Soviet target.
You're referring to the rolling up of a whole network of spies.
Of course, we didn't really know the whole extent of it at that time. We only knew part of it.
We've missed you around here.
Yes, you have. Things have really slipped.
Well, I don't know about that.
I do know. They have.
Jean Vertevay joined the agency in 1955 as a typist, typical for women hired in those early days. She devoted her life to the CIA, served around the world, and rose to branch chief of counterintelligence.
Look at me for a second, and you're okay on that?
She was very private. She was very serious.
And happy to keep the agency's secrets until it became impossible.
Why did you accede to our request?
Because I think that we have a story to tell and that it hasn't been told, and it probably should get out since everybody else's story has been told.
It became clear to Jean that the assets had been exposed and arrested. Sandy Grimes finally heard about it from the chief of her division.
We've lost more assets in the last 3 months than at practically any other time in our history.
I have to tell you, it's like I've never been kicked in the stomach before, but you can't catch your breath. Some of those people who were rolled up, I considered my best friends. There were difficult times, and you couldn't tell anybody. I mean, what would you do if your best friend is murdered? You can't go home and tell your wife about it. You can't tell your friends.
But there was a job to do.
As far as I've determined, there are 3 possible explanations for our asset losses. One is poor tradecraft.
Their work would be difficult. It would take years. There would be recriminations before they were through.
2, communications failure. The KGB is somehow intercepting our secure messages.
And there were so many places to look.
I devised a database, and I had something like, ended up with about 44 fields.
And 3 is human penetration. Someone in this building is a traitor.
You've been killing everyone I gave you.
What did you think was going to happen?
The KGB had acted with brutal simplicity, a departure from the usual game of shadows. It was out of character, and it misled the CIA.
The thinking was, indeed, that it was not a human mole. They don't want to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. So if they have somebody with continued access, a penetration, a mole, they're not going to roll up the cases.
Solve the breach. How are the KGB getting our information?
The security breach could have come from anywhere. It could have come from Edward Lee Howard, a bitter and brilliant agent who defected to the Soviet Union in 1985 after the CIA fired him.
The CIA trained him. He used their escape techniques to elude the FBI. Instead, Edward Lee Howard turned up in Moscow, where he was given a safe haven.
That same month,
The Marines have been holding a 25-year-old sergeant, Clayton Lonetreat.
a lonely U.S. embassy guard in Moscow fell for a Russian secretary. She worked for the KGB.
And through her became involved in an espionage network.
Many possibilities. At that moment, Rick Ames was not one of them.
We're calling him Mr. X, and he says he has the answer to our problems.
And the KGB created elaborate tricks to convince them that there were no moles inside the CIA.
He says we have a communication breach. The KGB can read our cables.
Meanwhile, Ames had a new assignment, Rome. He and Rosario would soon have a child, a boy, Paul. Ames continued to feed secrets to the Soviets. They continued to pay.
Somebody is paying some attention to you in Rome too, aren't they? Isn't anybody watching you in Rome?
No.
Nobody?
No. I mean, we're talking about an agency that did not have a serious counterintelligence, counterespionage capability.
The KGB worked hard to protect Ames. A KGB agent even pretended to turn traitor. He assured the CIA the KGB had no asset inside the agency. He said the leaks simply came from CIA sloppiness in the field.
Beautifully run. KGB deserves a lot of credit.
It was designed to confuse, and it worked.
You have to remember we're working in a big bureaucracy, and there are chains of command, and some people believe one thing and they say, no, you should pay more attention to this, and other people say, well, no, I think that it's some other way. But I think that a consensus was not reached to the fact that we were barking up the wrong tree until 1988.
4 years after Ames's treason, the working group finally knew that the problem was no technical breach, and it wasn't human error. Instead, something more disturbing. The source was one of their own.
Who's out there? Could be a woman.
But uncovering the identity of the traitor was no longer a top priority for the agency.
Why did they kill our investigation?
A mole in the SE division does not make the CIA look good. And as long as no more assets are dying, why kick the hornet's nest?
How can you be so calm?
the serenity to accept the things they cannot change.
That's where we differ.
I know. That's what makes us a good team.
Undeterred, Jean and Sandy pressed on.
In counterintelligence, your greatest successes are your worst failures. And I think you just had to tell yourself that. Did we want to catch a spy in CIA? That was our goal. But did we want to have a spy in CIA? No. But each one of us involved in this understood that that was going to be the case.
Sandy even turned down a $25,000 early retirement offer to continue investigating. For her, rooting out the mole was personal.
When those Soviets agreed to work for the United States government, we knew, they knew, they were putting their lives in our hands. And, you know, there's no nice way to say it. We failed them. We failed them. Their deaths were really on our hands.
And so the mole hunting team chased lead after lead. Until 1989, when Rick and Rosario returned to Washington. The hard evidence would come later, but the case turned on a hunch, a feeling, a haircut.
Look at him. He's changed.
He bought new clothes in Italy. I think he looks nice.
But he comes back to headquarters in September of '89. It wasn't the Rick I knew. He stood up straight. His hair was beautifully coiffed. He had lovely Italian suits on. This was not Rick Ames. The gentleness was gone. He was a different person. The arrogance filled the room.
The word I use is sleek. He becomes sleek, and he never was sleek before.
Ames told his colleagues his newfound wealth came from Rosario's family in Bogota.
There were all kinds of signs that Rick Ames was changing.
Well, sure. And the same was true of many of my colleagues who married younger foreign wives, inherited money, went through midlife crises, wore sandals to work.
How long have you been there?
I don't know. A while.
Later, Rosario claimed she had begun to suspect what her husband was doing.
Did you think about turning him in?
Not really. I didn't know. I thought of leaving constantly, but turning him in was something that I didn't think I could do. What proof did I have? It's such a bizarre story. You know, it's not like your husband tells you he's got another woman.
The team soon turned up another piece of circumstantial evidence pointing to Ames. A CIA colleague who had known them in Mexico City visited Rick and Rosario's expensive new home in Virginia.
Rosario said they paid over $500,000 for it.
Okay, and?
They paid in cash.
Still, Ames was not their only suspect.
We want to conduct a straw poll. Go through all these names.
We couldn't investigate 160 people. It was an impossibility. We knew the person we were looking for was not going to be a stranger. He'd be a colleague. He'd be somebody we'd known for many years. Someone we probably saw every single day.
Pick 5 you think we should focus on and rank them from highest to lowest.
So when we ask everybody, the 4 members of our team, to list 4 or 5 people who made them uneasy, we really did use that word, uneasy.
Then I would like to assign numerical values to everyone's choices.
6 points for first place, 5 for second. And we totaled the number of points. And Rick came up first. He had the most points, 21.
For his part, Ames wasn't worried. He didn't think the spy-catching team was up to the task.
We've been trying to figure out what happened since 1985, and they've gotten nowhere. They put 2 women on the job, and they will never catch me. Never.
What allowed me to go on as long as I did in the manner in which I did, with with a good deal of overconfidence and carelessness was the lack of a professional counterintelligence, counterespionage function, staff in the agency and in the FBI.
Ames was so confident he had even offered Sandy some friendly advice on her first day with the new task force.
Sandy!
Whom do I run into? There's good old Rick.
I was just wondering how the interviews are going.
What are you doing? I said, well, I'm up here. Gina and I are going to take another look at the old cases. And he said, that's great.
Will you let me know if there's anything else I can do? Because I'm happy to help.
And then he proceeded to give me a lecture, 101, on good counterintelligence work. I think he took great pleasure in the fact that he'd been doing this since 1985 and he hadn't been caught.
Rosario says she learned the source of their lavish wealth a year and a half before the arrest, but did nothing to stop her husband.
It was blood money you were spending.
Yes, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
But did you ask yourself, what could he be giving them? What is he giving them?
No, I didn't want to know anything about details.
But you had to know it was something big to be getting that amount of money.
I really didn't think about that. That was the farthest thing from my mind. It really was.
But the money kept coming in. You would still spend it.
That's my mistake. I didn't do anything to change. I didn't change anything for those 18 months. I did not. And that is what I'm here for, and that is what I've accepted having done.
She never conspired to commit espionage. She didn't conspire with me or with the Russians to commit espionage.
It seemed like the case finally broke when the CIA got access to Ames's bank records and noticed a pattern of unusual cash deposits.
I had come across information that in early 1985, Rick was attempting to develop a Soviet arms control specialist named Chuvakin. Early August 1992.
Wow.
Dan had just received a package from one of the local banks where Rick and Rosario had an account. And in that package, there were 3 deposit slips.
On May 14th, he logged a meeting with his KGB contact.
That's interesting, because on May 15th, he made a deposit for $9,500. $9,100 deposit on the 28th.
Oh my gosh, the day before, he had a meeting with Mr. Chuvakin.
On June 5th, he deposited $9,850.
Again, a lunch with Chuvakin. The final deposit slip.
October 15th.
$9,200 deposit on the 16th.
That was it for me. I wasn't terribly ladylike in my speech, but basically I said it doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell what's going on here. Rick is a damned Soviet spy.
But after all that, the FBI report did not name Ames as the prime suspect. Still frustrating over 20 years later.
It was politics. That's my guess. I do not know the answer to that.
The report was inconclusive. CIA higher-ups wanted more evidence for a subpoena. There were still multiple suspects. And then there was the polygraph exam.
Please state your name for the record.
Aldrich Hazen Ames.
Had you actually been trained to beat a polygraph?
No.
You figured that out by yourself?
Well, I'd had a lot of experience with polygraphs over the years, and I had a lot of ideas about polygraphs.
Experience in what sense?
Giving tests, taking them.
Have you ever accepted money for classified information?
No.
Why bother giving them if you don't believe in them?
Well, the agency believes in giving them.
Have you ever spied for a foreign government?
No.
You beat it how?
I tried to relax and stay calm. That's the best advice I had, and that was the best advice there was.
But the reactions, after all, are sort of galvanic reactions, skin reactions, sweating, blood pressure. I mean, it's one thing to try and stay.
What do they really mean? This is sorcery.
He passed with flying colors.
Some people are still surprised at how well he did.
Give them a small, useless truth hidden within a greater lie.
I have had a lot of experience with polygraphing assets agents who work for us, and I don't really see too much correlation between the polygraph and what really has happened.
The Cold War was over. The Soviet Union had crumbled. And 8 long years after Rick Ames walked into that embassy and offered to sell the CIA's assets, the final break in the case.
He contacted U.S. Embassy staff 24 hours ago. He says he has intelligence on them all.
Credible intelligence?
He says he has hard proof and a name. We agreed to meet him in Berlin.
I know his name.
Before you give us his name, we will need proof.
In counterintelligence, nothing could be taken at face value, but the tip helped corroborate the case against Ames.
We received additional information, thankfully. Not our story to tell. The important thing about it, it forced the FBI to open a full-scale investigation of Rick Ames. All the phones tapped, both at work and at home, and cameras. We were deathly afraid from that period, he wasn't arrested for a year, that he would catch wind of all this.
Once the wiretaps were installed, it was just a matter of time.
Had you asked for more money?
She knows he's a spy.
The recordings implicated Rosario as well. The FBI even filmed Ames in Colombia on the last of his meetings with his KGB contacts.
He never suspected. I still think he thinks he's smarter than we. We were still women. But I think Rick thought that about a lot of people.
The morning that he was arrested it was a Monday, and it was a holiday, a government holiday.
FBI! Alder James, you're under arrest!
Get out of the car with your hands above your head!
I was getting ready to fly to San Diego for a business meeting. Sandy was getting up and she was going to work, and I said, "Why are you going to work? You know, it's a government holiday." And she said, "Well, I can't tell you what's going on, but I have to go in. But when you get to San Diego, pay attention to the television, the news." So I landed in San Diego, and a colleague and I were walking through the airport, and there was a picture of Alder James being arrested.
Russian agents from spying on the U.S. is accused of spying for them. In other words, of being a double agent on the payroll of the CIA and the KGB.
And I said, "My God, that's exactly what this was all about." I was never expected to know anything more than what was going on at a very superficial level. Her career it consisted of things that you just didn't talk about.
The FBI and the CIA did a very good job on this. They worked on it for a long time. And I can tell you that it is very serious.
It wasn't like winning the state championship in high school or the Super Bowl. It was, yes, yes, we did it.
You know Officers Vertifay and Grimes?
Hello, Aldrich.
Hello.
It's hard to hate him, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, when you're in his company, I have to stop and think of what he did. And if I don't stop and think about what he did, it's just good old Rick.
I'd like to hear about every secret you passed and every asset you killed.
Polishuk, Martinov, Veranik, Tolkachev, Vasilev, Smirtanin, Motorin, Pigazov, Yuzhin, and Polyakov.
We didn't have to worry any longer about Rick getting away with treason.
It was headline news, not of a victory of spy catching, but of a failed institution.
Good evening. We begin tonight with one of the burning questions in Washington. How could it have taken so long? So long to arrest the highest-ranking CIA officer ever accused of selling out to the Russians?
The CIA was humiliated, the butt of easy jokes about the mole inside the very organization supposed to catch him. The media had a field day.
Here is a guy who, after all, has contact with Soviets. So, I mean, he has the opportunity.
But that's what he's supposed to do. So that's what he's paid for, is to have contacts with Soviets. So I mean, you don't think anything unusual.
I understand. But I mean, if you look at opportunity, motive, need, you're usually depicted as the heroine of this story because you kept looking where others weren't looking at all. But I'm simply asking...
No, that's not true either.
Congress wasted no time assigning blame.
An independent commission is about to begin a review of the CIA top to bottom and exert considerable pressure on an agency that appears unable to police itself.
It was surprising to all of us. And Jean really bore the brunt of it. She was the senior officer, and she was selected to go to the hearings on the Hill, and there were politics. We didn't know if we were heroes or villains.
Then a final insult. Ames was asked to testify to both the Senate and House investigative committees, called upon for his expertise and his insights, something he was also happy to share later from jail.
Some people may be offended that I'm even asking you, but I think it's a point of some interest to hear from you what you think the weaknesses of the agency are.
Espionage services should be relatively small. They should be relatively weak. They should be relatively poor. They should not be autonomous bureaucratic establishments with their own turf to protect.
There was no trial. The sentence, life for Rick Ames, 5 years for his wife. Their son left without parents. Rosario blamed it all on the man she said she now despised, that she had been played.
Yes, especially when you know you were married to that person, that person is the father of your son, that he can have done something to a little boy who will for now and forever be the spy's son is inconceivable to me.
The boy went to live with his grandmother in Colombia.
But someday you will want to explain to your son what you did and why you did it.
That kind of explanation, that kind of understanding, that kind of communication is going to have to wait for a while. Things have to be on a freeze till Rosario gets home. And it's at that point that she and Paul move on with life.
You have no choice in the matter. But if you did, would you urge them as best they can to excise you from their lives?
No, I wouldn't do that. But as you said, this isn't my decision.
We're done.
If it had not been for Rosario, there would have been no espionage. Rick was sort of the creature of his wives. If he had married somebody who said, look, honey, we can't afford to do this. You've got some debt that you've got to get out of. Let's only eat at McDonald's. Let's go on a budget. Let's do this, let's do that till we get ourselves squared away.
Deep inside the Soviet Union, the Polyakovs tried to leave the painful chapter behind.
That was forbidden topic to talk in our family. I was told not to tell anyone that I was associated with General Polyakov.
But they could not escape the stain of treason. Marina's father lost his job and Marina was shunned by kids at school.
And I kind of was not invited to birthdays, and probably their parents told them not to talk to me or be friends with me.
In books and documentaries, Marina's grandfather was referred to simply as the mole.
Once I was just flipping through the channels, watching TV, and I saw that footage of his arrest. It was pretty, it was hard.
But when the CIA finally brought Marina and her parents to the United States in 2000, she came across a book that told a very different story.
I saw the picture of myself in the book, and I was very surprised because I had no idea that that book was coming. It was like 3 chapters were devoted to my grandfather.
The authors of that book, Jean.
My hand is getting cramped up.
And Sandy.
Fame is a cruel taskmaster.
My first book signing was at Books A Million in McLean, Virginia. I'd never done a book signing before, rather exciting.
And her story was about to take one more improbable twist.
And I was the first one in the line, standing there with the book.
This absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous blonde. Tall, beautifully dressed, and she had a copy of the book.
Hi. Who would you like to make the dedication out to?
I didn't know even what to say, so I just opened the book where the picture was.
She didn't introduce herself, she just pointed to the picture in the book and she said, "That's me."
And make it out for my grandfather, Dmitry Polakov.
I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. I was so shocked.
I thank you. I thank you for everything you did.
Yeah, it was almost, in some respects, that the title of the book even meant something more. It was a true circle. It was a circle of humanity. Not, you could leave the word treason off, but we had come full circle.
Friends since that first meeting, Marina and Sandy lived just 30 minutes apart, not far from the CIA where Sandy worked for so long. The last time Sandy Grimes saw the man she hunted for 10 years was at a bond hearing in 1995.
It was at the beautiful federal, the tiny old one, I guess, federal courthouse in Alexandria. I was surprised about how small it was, but it was just a lovely, lovely courthouse. And it was filled with FBI guys. And my first memory was everybody was taking their guns out. I have never seen so many guns on a table in my life, and they were big guns. I hear a sound. It's a sound I've never, ever heard in my life. And I turned around, and it was the leg irons. Clang, clang, clang. And here was Rick in his jumpsuit, Alexandria City Jail, and the next one to come in was Rosario. Oh, it was wonderful. He was still standing at the end. I remember it was a magistrate. And he said, "Mr. Ames, yours is a crime against every single citizen in this country." And the gavel came down.